Buying a Rolex is not only an interesting but also at times a little confusing experience too. You arguably get similar watches with circular hour markers in the dial, similar Mercedes hand for hours, exactly same bracelet and the clasp, same brush case with polished sides, and then in this case you also get a fourth hand in the dial for the GMT time, and well, very similar bezel too. But in the collector's world, even a change of font changes the whole watch experience. And well, let aside the change of font, change of color, or even the digit 6 or 9 being open or closed will change not only the wrist experience but also the whole value and desirability of your watch. If this is your first Rolex, you likely won't get what I'm saying. But if this isn't, you'd know exactly what I mean. So let's talk about what makes Explorer a completely different watch from GMT. And despite all the similarities quoted earlier, they are so different watches that they can actually be had in the same collection, and you will still have a new experience each time you change between them. Rolex Explorer came out in 1953 and GMT in 1955, but the Explorer in this comparison is Explorer II and not Explorer I. And although it does link historically directly to the original Explorer from 1953, it was a completely new design, and the purpose was different with the Explorer II as well than it was for Explorer I. In that context, Explorer II was unveiled in 1971, and the dial layout was then further redesigned in 1989. If you want to know more history of Explorer, I will link the videos above and in the description below, and you can watch my other videos on Explorer I and Explorer II to know more about their history. If we talk about GMT, the dial face of GMT is unchanged since its release in 1955. So in terms of history, GMT is the undefeated champion here, and there's no question about it. Talking about the physical differences, the biggest difference is the size of the case, with the Explorer being 42mm and GMT measuring at 40mm. The size difference is easily reflected in the overall wear of the watch too, with the lug-to-lug height of GMT at 48.5mm and Explorer at 50.5. So exactly 2mm larger in terms of lug-to-lug. This bigger lug-to-lug means more wrist presence of Explorer, and this can be a positive or a negative based on your personal preference or wrist size. The GMT follows the same case design and proportions as maxi case of Submariner, and accordingly comes with 4mm wide lug thickness. The wider lugs make the GMT look more angular and squarer in shape. The Explorer II comes with milder 3mm thickness of lug, despite bigger case size dimensions compared to GMT, which makes it look more like a conventional or circular watch. Due to larger size, the Explorer comes with slightly wider bracelet than GMT. That is, we have 21mm bracelet on Explorer and 20mm on GMT. At the clasp, interestingly, we have the same width of 17mm on both watches, which means that bracelet tapering down on Explorer is more steeper than it is on GMT. And I personally think that the lesser tapering on GMT or Rolex Submariner aligns better with their squarer and angular looks. None of these watches have the clasps that come with glide lock system, but they do have 5mm quick extension link. The bezel on both of these watches is another main difference, where on GMT you have a bi-directional bezel to measure a second time zone. Based on GMT time zone, you can move the bezel on GMT by as many clicks either way as you want to read the second time zone, and then you have the same dial showing two different time zones. The Explorer comes with fixed bezel, and essentially the purpose of GMT hand here is not to read the second time zone, rather to tell you whether the time you read is in AM or PM. The bezel on GMT is ceramic, so you can't ding or dent it, whereas the bezel on Explorer is steel. So although it can be dinged or damaged, it can't be shattered or broken upon a hit like a ceramic bezel. The font on the bezel is the same on both watches, but interestingly, the size of font is bigger in GMT, and that makes it look bigger even when it's only 40mm. And for the same reason, Explorer gives a smaller look, largely due to the steel bezel that lacks the contrast in the case. And then the font size is also smaller too than it is on the GMT. Both watches come with Cyclops lens for the date, which is the iconic design feature of Rolex watches. The Explorer comes with slightly bigger hour markers and larger hands too, to align the proportions with the bigger dial size. Explorer has fully brushed bracelet as opposed to GMT, which comes with polished center links for the bracelet. The GMT model is also now replaced with a new reference that comes with Jubilee bracelet, and this oyster bracelet with the polished center links is accordingly no more offered with the GMTs. Both watches come with 100 meters of water resistance, but interestingly, the size of crown on GMT is considerably bigger than it is on Explorer. Both crowns, however, come with triple action, with first one for winding, second for setting the date using the hour hand, and third one for setting the time. The case thickness on both Explorer and GMT Master is also the same, so you get the same look, yet the Explorer looks thinner due to larger size. None of these look chunkier due to thinner case profile regardless. On my 6.5 inches wrist, both watches wear fine. However, the Explorer wears slightly larger, and that's understandable due to bigger case it carries. Upon wearing GMT, it also stays in the center of the wrist and does not look small or off by any factor. Both watches sit perfect, with none of them flaring out at the lugs. And with my wrist size being on the smaller side, I've had no feeling that either of these watches look too small or large. The bracelet with both watches contour to my wrist perfectly, and the watches hug the wrist as I want them to. The Explorer comes with a bit of additional heft and wrist presence, as you would expect from a bigger size naturally, but the GMT is more eye-catchy despite being a smaller watch, and that is primarily due to its polished center links on the bracelet, and also the polished wedges at the bezel that make the watch slightly louder. With the bracelet for both of these watches adjusted to 6.5 inches wrist, Explorer weighs 150 grams on the scale, and the GMT is slightly lighter at 142 grams. The difference is very slight, and on the wrist, it's not even noticeable. But it's there, again, likely due to the difference in the case sizes. There is no wrong choice here, and both of these watches have more similarities than the differences. If your considerations include a more understated watch with a bit of larger size and wrist presence, a little more versatile watch that flies under the radar, want a more legible dial of the two in terms of time reading, want to use it mostly with casual attire or lifestyle, and also prefer a wide dial in the watch, Explorer II should get your attention. But if you want a watch with a bling factor, require an ability to read second time zone due to frequent travels, seek an iconic Rolex face with a richer history that's over 50 years long, and a face that is unchanged in all the history, and then further want to use it for formal occasions or attire, the GMT Master should be your pick of the two. With GMTs now offered on a Jubilee bracelet, the bling factor has further increased and size and wear of the watch has reduced. So if you pick the GMT, the new Bezel or Pepsi on Jubilee bracelet will complement or rather strengthen the GMT attributes even better.